Hi there, Stephen Dalton here. I just wanted to let you know that I'm a real human being. Look me up. I promise I'm real. Hello, my friend. Welcome to your sleep story. My name is Stephen Dalton. I'm an Irish storyteller, and it's my great privilege to be the voice that you listen to as you go to sleep tonight. You may remember some time ago, I wrote and narrated a series of stories about a great love that blossomed through love letters between Clara and James. Well, tonight, I have put all those stories together for you, and I have also added a short concluding chapter at the end. I really hope you enjoy hearing of this epic love from another time long ago and hearing all of the chapters together. But first, let's do the relaxation session, which will take a few minutes before tonight's sleep story. I'm going to count down from 10 to 1, and as I do, allow yourself to let go more and more. 10. Feel the support of the bed beneath you, or the floor, or whatever you lie upon tonight. And beneath what you lie upon, feel a deeper support. The support of the earth, our home, our constant support. And as you become aware of that support, see if you can sink into this moment a little more now. Just let go. A little more now. 9. You are safe. Allow my voice to be an anchor of safety tonight. To be a friend, to be a gentle guide, a guide that only ever brings you to safe places, to warm and cozy places, to places that enable and support your sleep. Trust that my voice is a friend tonight. Eight. Feel into your body now. Notice where you might still be holding tonight. Notice where you may have pain or tingling or tension. Notice anything. Maybe you feel something in your feet or in your lower legs or your thighs or your belly, your chest, shoulders, your neck, your back, arms, hands, Or maybe you're like me and you hold tension in your face. Just see if you can soften a little now. This is a time for kindness to yourself and to your body. Seven. The day is done. Whatever has been, has been. Whatever will be, will be. But right now, all you have is this moment. Your thoughts can't change what has gone before. Your thoughts can't change what will come tomorrow. Your brain needs rest now. So, as thoughts come and go now, don't fight them. Don't chase them away. See them for what they are. Thoughts. Then just watch them go like leaves floating away on a moonlit river, or clouds passing through a starlit sky. Six. This is your moment. This is your time. You have earned this moment of kindness to yourself. You deserve to have peace in your life. We all do. So, as you become aware of that fact, as you come to the understanding that we all deserve peace, see if you can settle into this moment a little more now, letting your body know that it's really time for rest. Five. Peace lives within you. It is a constant friend, waiting to be found, waiting to be felt. Where does it live within you? Maybe it's in your heart. Maybe it's in your head. It's up to you to find it. But I promise you it's there. 4. Perhaps allow a little gratitude now. Gratitude for the simple things, for your body, for the shelter you have tonight, for the ones you love and who love you, for the beauty and wonder of this world, of this planet, that you can find when you look for it. Three, begin to engage with your imagination now. Begin to see an old steam train, and on that train someone is writing and reading letters. 2. Checking in with your body one more time now. Finding the places you are holding still, and allowing yourself to give in, to allow the tension to ease away. Your body has worked hard for you today. It's time to give it rest. And 1. Completely letting go now, as I tell you tonight's sleep story. She sits almost regally aboard the sumptuous steam train. The year is 1896, and it has been 15 years since she first met him, when she was but a child. The day she met him was a day like any other that one might have as a young child, being from a grand family in the 19th century. Her parents had been visiting his parents at their estate, and they had run through the woods together, ridden the little Shetland ponies, and enjoyed their time. But, as fate would have it, they were not to see each other again, at least for a very, very long time. But a connection was made that day. Something deep, something almost spiritual. And it was only a matter of time before the first letter was sent by her to him. Their parents had seen it as something cute and something interesting, that she had expressed an interest in writing to him. The first letter was written in a careful, childlike hand, with slightly uneven lines and smudged ink where her small fingers had pressed a bit too hard. Dear James, I hope you remember me. I am the girl you played with when your mama and papa had us over. I liked your ponies very much, and you said I could ride them again one day. I am writing to tell you that I liked meeting you, and I hope we can meet again soon. Please write back if you can, as it would make me very happy to have a friend who lives far away. Sincerely, Clara. Clara's first letter had been one of innocence, driven by the novelty of having a friend from a distant estate, a friend who shared her delight in the simple joys of childhood. It had been sent with little expectation, really. Just a young girl's impulse to reach out across the miles. But she could not have known then how significant that small gesture would become, how each letter thereafter would stitch a growing bond across time and distance. Now, as she sat aboard the plush train carriage, with its rich burgundy seats and polished wood panels, she looked out at the mist-covered landscape rolling past the windows. She could feel the gentle sway of the train as it glided along the tracks, the rhythmic clatter providing a steady, soothing soundtrack to her thoughts. She took some deep breaths in this moment. In and out. In and out. She was no longer the little girl who had run through the woods, carefree and curious. She had grown into a young woman, her face composed and calm, though there was a hint of nervousness in the way her gloved hands rested on her lap. The years had passed, and the letters had continued, taking on new shapes and tones as she and James had grown older. Her eyes fell closed, and for a moment she remembered James's first letter to her. Dear Clara, I do remember you. I remember the ponies too. And I remember you laughed when we ran through the woods because you said I could not catch you. I think I would have if you had not climbed that tree. I told my father about your letter, and he said I should write you back. So here I am. It is strange to think of you far away, but I like the idea of having a friend across the hills and rivers. Perhaps you can tell me about where you live. Your friend, James. The words of the letter were as clear to her now as they were on the day she received them. She looked out from the train carriage across the misty countryside. It was late morning, and a pale sunlight filtered through the fog, casting the world in soft greys and greens. Outside the window, fields and hedgerows slipped past. The landscape was dotted with farmhouses and grazing sheep, all half hidden in the mist, as though part of some dreamlike painting. Inside the carriage, the calmness was almost absolute. There was a steady hum of movement beneath her feet as the train glided over the rails, and as she settled deeper into the plush seat, the memory of that first letter lingered, the childish innocence of it filling her with a quiet warmth. It was hard to believe that so much time had passed, that those words written with such youthful sincerity had grown into something more profound. Another memory surfaced, and with it, another letter. This one, from when they were a little older. Dear Clara, I think your mother may be mistaken about me being a polite young gentleman, but it is kind of you not to correct her. Russet the pony is well, though he is growing older and does not run as fast as he used to. I still take him out on rides, and sometimes I talk to him as though he were a person. I tell him about the letters you send and the things you say. He looks at me with his big brown eyes, and I like to think he understands. I was very interested in what you said about the old trees. There is a grove near our house where the trees seem to lean toward each other, as if sharing secrets. Sometimes I go there when I want to think. I wish you could see it. I think you would like it very much. I have often wondered what you look like now. I remember you were very good at climbing, and I imagine you still are. Your friend, James. The train now passed through a small village. Its station only a blur of brick and greenery. The countryside seemed to stretch endlessly now, a patchwork of fields and hills. The pale blue sky peeking through the lingering mist. The steady rocking of the train, the muted clatter on the tracks were like a gentle lullaby, guiding her thoughts from one memory to the next. The letters continued. Month after month, season after season, year after year. And as the years went by, They grew longer and more thoughtful as Clara and James shared more of themselves. The questions of youth and dreams for the future beginning to manifest on the pages. Each letter became a window into their lives. Dear James, you asked if I ever feel the way you described, about looking forward to the letters and finding comfort in knowing you were there. I do, more than I can say. There is something special about reading your words, knowing that you've taken the time to sit and put your thoughts down on paper for me. It makes me feel as though I am not so far away from you after all. I've thought about what you said regarding your future. I understand, I think, the difficulty of having the path set before you. My parents, too, speak often of what is expected of me. But sometimes I wish I could choose something entirely different. I don't know exactly what that would be, but I think it might involve something with words. I've always liked writing, as you know, but not just letters. I mean writing stories, or perhaps even poems. There is a feeling I get when I find just the right way to describe something, as though I have given a little piece of life to the page. Do you ever feel that way about anything? I hope that wherever your thoughts drift to, they lead you somewhere that brings you joy. Yours always, Clara. Clara shifted in her seat, her fingers tracing the edge of her bonnet, as she thought of James's reply to that letter, written with a surprising depth of feeling for someone so young. Dear Clara, I know exactly what you mean about words. I feel the same way, though perhaps not with writing, but with the land. When I walk through the grove or out into the fields, there is a sense of being part of something much larger. It is difficult to describe, but I find that the world seems somehow clearer when I am outside, like the air is lighter and my thoughts are less tangled. I suppose that is why I sometimes think about becoming a naturalist or a botanist, though I doubt my father would approve. He would rather I speak of numbers and ledgers than flowers and birds. But you understand, don't you? I am inspired by the idea that there are still places in this world that are untamed, that hold secrets we have not yet uncovered. I think I could be happy spending my days learning about them, but I know that may not be possible. Still, when I read your letters, it makes me believe, if only for a little while, that I might have the courage to choose a different path. Yours faithfully, James. Their letters had become much more than words on a page. They were the heartbeats of their youth, their hopes and fears laid bare. It was through these letters that Clara came to know James, not just as a friend from childhood, but as a kindred spirit, a young man with dreams and doubts, much like her own. Dear James, there is something I have been reluctant to share, but I feel that I must, as you have always been open with me. The truth is, I do not feel entirely at home in the life that has been laid out for me. My parents are kind, of course, and they have given me a good education and many comforts, but I find myself yearning for something beyond the walls of our estate. I want to see more of the world, to travel and experience life in all its colors, even the ones that are not so bright. I do not know if it is foolish of me to feel this way. Sometimes, when I speak of it, my mother simply laughs and says it is a phase I shall grow out of. But I do not think it is. There is a part of me that longs for freedom, for the chance to choose my own path, even if it is one that others do not understand. I do not know why I am telling you this, except that there is something in your letters that gives me hope. You speak of the untamed places, of learning about the world's secrets, and I think that is what I want too, even if I do not yet know how to find it. Yours truly, Clara. The train rocked gently as it rounded a curve, and Clara could feel her heart beating a little faster as she remembered the letter James had sent in reply. It had been one of the first letters where she truly felt the depth of his understanding and the sincerity of his words. Dear Clara, I understand more than you know. There is a restlessness in me as well, a desire to break free of the expectations that seem to press down from all sides. I do not think it is foolish at all. In fact, I think it is brave to acknowledge it, even if others do not. I often think that perhaps we are meant for more than just the paths that are set before us, that there is a kind of calling in all of us that goes beyond the ordinary. You speak of freedom, and I think that is what we both seek, in our own ways. I do not know where our lives will lead us, but I find comfort in knowing that there is someone else who understands, who is not afraid to dream of something different. I believe that one day we will find our way, even if it is not the way we expected. Yours always, James. Clara then reflects as she looks out the window on how the letters began to change and how the words took on a new intensity over time. The familiar comfort of their correspondence became a lifeline as they both confided in each other, things they could not say aloud to anyone else. Dear James, I must admit to you that I am not happy. My parents have begun to speak in earnest about a marriage arrangement with a young man I scarcely know. His family is well regarded and well off, and my parents are delighted with the prospect. But, James, I do not know him. He has called on us several times, and though he is perfectly polite and agreeable, I cannot bring myself to feel anything more than a cordial indifference towards him. The thought of marrying him fills me with dread, and I find myself looking for excuses to be absent when he is near. I do not know what to do. It feels as though the walls are closing in, and I fear there will be no escape. Do you know of such feelings? Have you ever found yourself faced with a path you do not wish to walk, but which seems inevitable? Yours, Clara. Clara had written that letter late at night, after another strained dinner with her parents and the man who was to be her husband. She had sent it with trembling hands, hardly daring to hope for an answer that could bring any relief. But James had replied quickly, and his words were filled with a similar unrest. Dear Clara, I understand all too well what you speak of. I have kept it from you until now, but my parents have also arranged for me to marry a young woman from a respected family. I have met her once, and though she is fair and kind, I do not love her. How could I, when my heart is drawn elsewhere? I am meant to court her properly over the coming months, and our families are already speaking as though the matter is settled. But I feel as though I am being led toward a future that does not belong to me. Clara, I must confess, it is your letters that sustain me during this time. It is in your words that I find solace and a sense of possibility, even in the darkest moments. I know not what to do, but I cannot resign myself to a life I do not choose. I feel as though my only chance for happiness lies far from here, and that my heart is already spoken for. Yours in uncertainty, James. For a time, their letters were filled with a desperate kind of hope, as they began to speak not only of their feelings, but of their plans, of how they might escape the futures that had been arranged for them. It was in one of Clara's next letters that the plan took shape, her words trembling with a mixture of fear and excitement. Dear James, I can scarcely write these words, for I know what I am about to propose is drastic, but I can see no other way. My parents are becoming more insistent about the marriage, and I fear that if I do not act now, I will lose all choice in the matter. I must leave. I am planning to run away from home. There is a train that departs from a small station not far from our estate in 3 days' time, heading toward the coast. If I board that train, I can reach the port town where we had once spoken of meeting. I shall be alone, and if you could find a way to meet me there at the station, we could depart together for India by boat, no longer bound by the plans our families have made for us. There is a ship leaving for India shortly after, and I have made inquiries about purchasing passage. It is all arranged, as long as we both arrive on time. James, if there is any chance that you can make it, if you are willing to leave everything behind, then please be there. I shall wait for you on the platform when my train arrives. Yours, with all my heart, Clara. Sending that letter had felt like taking a breath. Clara had packed a small bag in secret and prepared herself to leave, knowing that this was a step from which there would be no return. Her parents believed she was in her room, and she had to leave in the dark of night when the household was still. When James's response arrived, it came with a quiet determination that echoed her own. Dear Clara, I will be there. I have already made arrangements to leave under the cover of night. My parents will think I am visiting a distant relative, but in truth, I will make my way to the same station, and we shall meet there. We will leave this life behind us, with all its expectations and constraints. The ship's captain is ready to receive us, and once we board, there will be no turning back. I do not know what awaits us in India, but I would rather face an uncertain future with you than a certain one without you. Clara, you have given me the courage to take this step, and I promise you, I will not let you down. I will be waiting on that platform when your train arrives, ready to begin this new chapter with you. Yours always, James. The letters had been a lifeline, but now they were also a pact. There was no going back to the lives they had known. There was only the promise of freedom, of a future they could shape together. As the train carried Clara through the quiet countryside, the trees and fields blurred by outside the window, their shapes dissolving now into the dusk. The rhythmic clatter of the wheels was the only sound. Then the train slowed. The platform coming into view. The little station was quiet and empty, save for a single figure standing in the shadows near the end of the platform. Clara's breath caught as she recognized him immediately, even from a distance, and with all those years that had passed. There was James, standing there with a small bag in hand, his face turned toward the approaching train. The engine hissed as it came to a stop, and the door of her carriage opened. Clara stepped down onto the platform of the seaside railway station. She took a few steps forward, and as she did, James stepped out of the shadows, his eyes meeting hers. They stood there for a moment, just looking at one another, as though the whole world had fallen away, leaving only the two of them. Neither of them spoke. There was no need. In his eyes, Clara saw the same love, hope, and courage she had felt in her own heart. It was a love that had been written across years of letters, a hope that had carried them through, and the courage that had brought them to this very moment. And in her gaze, James would see the same, the deep affection and trust that had grown between them, binding them to one another, even before they had spoken a single word in person. It was all there, in the way they looked at each other, and they both knew that this was just the beginning. The train began to pull out of the station, and as the steam rose up around them, Clara and James stepped closer, ready to take the next step into the unknown together. The time they spent together before boarding the ship was almost shared in perfect silence. They didn't need to say much. Just being together was enough. So many words had been exchanged through the letters that this silence felt right. They knew in time they would begin to open up and to learn to know each other in the physical world, beyond just words and paper. But perhaps this connection, this relationship, would still need the power of words and paper for a while, to help them adjust to knowing each other in real life. The ship before them was beautiful and both of them felt a deep and quiet calm, a feeling that everything they were doing was right for them, that they were following the path that was meant for them, the two of them, as a united couple, ready to embark on the greatest adventure of their lives, not just in the physical world, but in a world created by them, for them, between them. James held Clara's hand as they took the first steps onto the deck of the ship. The wood creaked softly beneath their feet, and they both paused for a moment, taking in the sight before them. The vessel was grand, but not ostentatious. Its beauty lay in the subtle details, the polished railings, the elegant lines of the hull, and the way the sunlight caught the white sails, billowing gently in the wind. The air was crisp with the scent of the sea, the tang of salt, and the promise of distant shores. Clara squeezed James's hand, a silent gesture of reassurance. He looked at her and smiled, feeling a wave of gratitude wash over him. It was still so new, this act of standing side by side, without a table between them, without ink-stained fingers and folded paper. They were together now in the world, sharing the same breath, hearing the same sounds, the cries of gulls, the gentle murmur of the crew, and the steady rhythm of the ocean below. They took a slow walk around the deck, exploring in companionable silence. James pointed out small details with a nod of his head. The brass bell polished to a gleam, the coils of rope stacked neatly by the rail, the crew busy at work, tying knots and adjusting sails. He and Clara exchanged a few quiet remarks, but mostly they just looked out at the expanse of blue that stretched endlessly before them. The ship was now sailing, and they were on their way. After a time, they found a secluded spot near the bow of the ship, away from the bustle of the crew. It was a peaceful corner where they could lean against the rail and watch the waves. Clara pulled a small, folded piece of paper from the pocket of her dress and handed it to James with a smile. He raised an eyebrow, but took it without a word, unfolding it carefully. The note was short, just a few words written in her familiar hand. "We are here together. Can you believe it?" James felt his chest tighten, the words touching him in a way he couldn't quite express. He pulled out a pencil from his coat pocket and scribbled a quick response on the back of the paper. "I never stopped believing it. Not once." He handed it back to her, and she read it, her eyes softening with emotion. Without speaking, she tucked the note away, a keepsake to hold on to. For now, they were content to be together in the silence, letting the sea carry them forward. As the day wore on, and the sun began to dip lower in the sky, James and Clara were shown to their separate cabins by a courteous steward. This was the 19th century after all, and the formality of it made them both smile. They weren't married, and so must have separate cabins. They followed the steward down a narrow, dimly lit corridor that smelled faintly of varnished wood and sea air. The steward stopped first at Clara's cabin, bowing slightly as he opened the door for her. Clara stepped inside and glanced around the small, tidy space. It was simple but comfortable. A narrow bed with fresh linens, a small writing desk tucked beneath a round porthole, and a single oil lamp casting a warm golden light. She turned back to James, standing in the doorway, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. "This will be your cabin, miss," the steward said, gesturing with a polite smile, "and the gentleman's is just next door." Clara nodded, but she couldn't hide the flicker of disappointment in her eyes. James caught it and gave her a reassuring smile, reaching out to squeeze her hand briefly before the steward led him away. The door closed with a soft click, and Clara was alone. She took a deep breath and moved to the small desk, tracing her fingers over the smooth wood. She could already picture herself here, writing another note for James, slipping it to him when they met on deck tomorrow morning. In the cabin next door, James set his bag down and exhaled slowly. He leaned against the wall, knowing Clara was just on the other side. He could almost feel her presence, could imagine her sitting at the desk, writing something beautiful that he couldn't wait to read. But the wall between them felt like more than just a thin partition of wood. It was a barrier that could only be crossed with words on paper for now. It was the way of things in these times. He knew that. He respected it even. But he couldn't deny the ache he felt, knowing she was so close, yet still out of reach. They needed to be married, and the realization settled heavily in his chest. It wasn't just about the cabins. It was about the life they were ready to build together, the unity they longed for with every passing moment. With a sudden determination, James sat at his own desk, pulled out a piece of paper, and began to write. The lines flowed easily, as if his heart had been waiting for this moment. Clara, my love, I feel the weight of this war between us more deeply than I ever imagined I would. It is only a thin piece of wood, yet it feels like miles of ocean. I want nothing more than to bridge this distance, to be by your side every hour of every day. We need to be married, and I want it to be as soon as possible, not because of any tradition or expectation, but because I cannot bear the thought of us being apart any longer. I will find a way. I promise you that. He folded the note carefully, then slipped out of his cabin. He paused outside Clara's door, listening for a moment to the soft, steady sound of the ocean outside. Then he gently tucked the note under her door and stepped away, his heart lighter now that he'd made his decision. A few moments later, Clara noticed the slip of paper at her door. She felt a rush of anticipation as she picked it up, knowing it was from James before she even opened it. She unfolded the note slowly, savoring the sensation of the crisp, folded edges beneath her fingertips. The words made her heart swell with a mix of joy and longing. She pressed the note to her lips, closing her eyes and feeling the truth of his words sink into her. Without hesitation, she took out her own paper and sat at the desk, the evening light filtering through the porthole. She dipped her pen into the ink and began to write. My dearest James, your words are the only thing that make this separation bearable. I feel you, just on the other side of this wall, and yet it might as well be an ocean. I, too, feel the weight of it, the need to be married, not for propriety, but because it feels as though we have already pledged ourselves to each other in every way that matters. The world may have its customs, but my heart knows we are already one. If you find a way, I will say yes 1,000 times over. She folded the note and held it to her chest for a moment before slipping it beneath the door. The small gesture, an act of intimacy that soothed her aching heart. Then she stood and went to the porthole, watching the sun sink lower, casting a golden path across the waves. It was a beautiful evening, the kind that promised a calm night on the ocean, with only the gentle rocking of the ship to lull them both to sleep. James found the note moments later. He smiled as he read Clara's words, her delicate handwriting, as familiar to him as his own now. He felt a sense of urgency, a deep need to make this right. to make them right. He left his cabin and made his way up to the deck where the air was cool and fresh. As he walked, he spotted a man standing by the railing, a figure he had noticed earlier, a quiet man dressed in simple dark robes, a book in his hands. There was something serene and timeless about him, like he belonged to the sea as much as the ship did. James felt a strange pull towards him, an instinct that he couldn't quite explain. He approached slowly, his steps measured and respectful. "Good evening," James said, inclining his head slightly. The man turned, his face kind and lined with age, yet his eyes were bright and clear. "Good evening, my son," the man replied with a gentle smile. "You look as though you have something on your mind." James hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "I do," he admitted. "I'm here with the woman I love. We are together in spirit, but separated by circumstance. We need to be married, and we wish for it to happen soon. I don't know why I'm telling you this, except that something about you feels different, as though you might understand." The man's smile widened, and he closed the book he had been reading. "I am a simple priest," he said softly, "and I have seen many young lovers set sail on this ocean. The sea has a way of bringing people together, sometimes in ways they never expect. If it is marriage you seek, I believe I may be able to help you." James felt a wave of relief and hope wash over him. He grasped the man's hand, his voice thick with gratitude. "Thank you," he said. "You have no idea what this means to us." "Oh, I believe I do," the priest said with a knowing smile. He glanced towards the cabins below deck. "Bring her here tomorrow evening. We will do this quietly, under the stars, with only the sea as our witness." James nodded. "I will, and thank you truly." As he made his way back to his cabin, he felt a buoyant sense of anticipation, a lightness he hadn't felt in months. They would be married by the sea, just as they had dreamed, with the stars above and the waves below. He couldn't wait to tell Clara. For now, though, he knew they needed one last night to themselves, a night of waiting, savoring the final moments of longing before they were joined forever. He took out one more piece of paper, his hand steady as he wrote. "Clara, my love, it is done. Tomorrow evening, we will be married by the sea, under the stars. There will be no more walls between us, only the open ocean and the endless sky. Sleep well tonight, knowing that our greatest journey begins tomorrow." He slipped the note under her door, then returned to his own cabin, feeling the gentle sway of the ship as it carried them towards their future. Clara noticed the letter as it came through the door. She unfolded the paper, and she read James's words slowly, savoring each one. She held the note to her chest after reading it, her eyes welling with tears of happiness. It was happening. The future she had imagined in the quiet moments of her solitude, in the small hours of the night as she penned her letters. Tomorrow, it would become their reality. She didn't need grand ceremonies or elaborate vows. The promise of James's love was the only vow she needed. Clara sat down at the desk, pulling out her own paper once more. Her hands were trembling slightly, but her heart was calm. My dearest James, you have made my heart fuller than I ever thought possible. Tomorrow we will stand beneath the stars and pledge ourselves to each other. I will wait for you, my love. I will be ready. Sleep well tonight, knowing that I am here, just on the other side of this wall, dreaming of our future together. James read her reply, and a smile spread slowly across his face. He lay back on the narrow bed, closing his eyes and listening to the sound of the ocean. Clara, too, settled into her bed, feeling the gentle rocking of the ship. And now, slowly, the steady pulse of the waves outside lulled them both into a gentle, restful sleep. The next morning, James woke with the first light of dawn filtering through his cabin. He lay still for a moment, absorbing the peaceful quiet of the ship before the day truly began. He knew today would be unlike any other, a day filled with quiet anticipation, a day he would remember forever. He sat up, reached for his writing desk, and pulled out a fresh piece of paper. He knew what he wanted to say to Clara, the words flowing easily as he imagined her reading them. My dearest Clara, today will be ours, but I think it should be spent apart until tonight. It feels right, doesn't it? To wait for the moment when the stars are above us and the sea is still, to finally see each other and make our vows. Meet me at the bow of the ship, just before midnight. Until then, I will keep you in my thoughts, and the next time I see you, it will be as we have dreamed, under the night sky, ready to begin our lives together. He folded the note with care and made his way to her cabin door. He hesitated for a moment, savoring the thought of her finding it, then slipped it beneath the door and walked away, giving her space to read it in her own time. Inside her cabin, Clara was already awake, sitting at her small desk with the porthole open to let in the fresh morning air. When she spotted the note on the floor, her heart gave a little leap. She picked it up and read it slowly, a smile spreading across her face. The idea felt perfect, a tradition they hadn't planned, but had chosen together. It felt like the right way to honor the moment, to let the anticipation build throughout the day. Clara reached for her own paper, her pen steady as she wrote back to him. My dearest James, yes, let us wait. There is something beautiful about knowing we are so close, yet choosing to keep our distance until it is time. I will spend today thinking of you, letting the hours stretch out in a way they never have before. I will meet you tonight. Until then, I will be content in knowing that the next time I see you, it will be forever. The day passed in a series of quiet, contemplative moments for them both. Clara found a place at the stern where she could watch the ship's wake trailing off into the endless blue. She took out her notebook and sketched the horizon, drawing the sun glinting off the water. It was calming, a way to pass the hours without feeling restless. James, on the other hand, took a seat near the bow, watching the dolphins play in the ship's wake. He leaned back against the railing, closing his eyes for a moment, and letting the warmth of the sun soak into his skin. Time passed, and as the sun began to dip lower, he took out one last piece of paper and wrote a short note to Clara. My love, the day has felt like a dream, hasn't it? The hours have stretched longer than any before, but I wouldn't trade this feeling for the world. I cannot wait to see you tonight. I will be there, waiting for you when the stars come out. Until then, just know that I am thinking of you with every breath. He left the note at her door, then retreated back to his cabin, giving himself time to prepare, to let the day's emotions settle before the night arrived. Clara found his final note as the sun set. She held it to her chest for a moment before folding it carefully and tucking it into her dress. The sky was beginning to darken, the first few stars making their appearance in the deepening blue. She took her time getting ready, letting the anticipation fill her with a quiet joy. She wore a simple dress, the one James loved, and pinned her hair back with a small silver clip. When she stepped out onto the deck, the sky was filled with stars, their light reflected in the calm, dark water below. As she approached the bow, she saw him there, standing alone, his silhouette outlined against the silver path of moonlight on the water. He turned as she neared, and for a moment they simply looked at each other, saying nothing. Clara took a step closer, and James met her halfway, reaching out to take her hand. He brought it to his lips, brushing a soft kiss across her knuckles, his eyes never leaving hers. "You're here," he said quietly, as though he still couldn't quite believe it. "I'm here," she whispered back, her voice filled with the same wonder. They stood together, side by side, looking out over the sea, feeling the world stretch out around them, vast and silent. Then the priest arrived, his face serene and calm in the moonlight. He carried no book, no candle, only the knowledge of what he was about to witness. He gave them both a small, understanding smile, as if he could see the depth of their love, the journey that had brought them here. "Are you ready?" he asked softly. James and Clara exchanged a glance, then turned back to him and nodded together. They moved closer, standing so near that their shoulders touched, the warmth of each other's presence grounding them in the moment. The priest began to speak, his voice low and steady, blending with the sound of the ocean. "The sea has seen many unions, witnessed countless vows, spoken under the stars," he said. "But tonight, it bears witness to yours, a love that has traveled far and grown strong through distance and words written by hand. Tonight you stand here, not just as two people, but as one, united by a promise you have already made in your hearts." He looked to James. "Will you take her hand and hold it, not just tonight, but through every dawn and dusk that lies ahead?" James turned to Clara, his expression soft, almost reverent. He took her hands in his, feeling the comfort of her touch. "I will," he said, his voice sure and steady. "I will hold your hand through every sunrise and every storm, for as long as I live." The priest nodded, then looked to Clara. "And you? Will you take his hand, to hold and cherish, through calm seas and rough waters, from this night forward?" Clara's eyes glistened with unshed tears, but her smile was radiant. She squeezed James's hands, her voice gentle but strong. "I will," she said. "I will stand by you through every tide and every turn, through every joy and sorrow as your partner, your love, your wife. The priest's smile widened, and he lifted his hand slightly, as if blessing the very air around them. Then, by the power of the sea and the stars above, I declare you husband and wife. May your love be as deep as the ocean and as constant as the stars. James pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her as he pressed a soft kiss to her lips. It was a kiss full of quiet passion. The world seemed to hold its breath for a moment. The ship itself, nearly pausing in its journey, as though giving them this time to savor their first moments as husband and wife. When they finally parted, they stayed close, foreheads resting together, breathing in the same air. "We did it," Clara whispered, her smile so wide it almost hurt. "We did," James murmured back, his voice thick with emotion. The priest stepped back, giving them a small bow. "Go now," he said kindly. "The night is yours." James took Clara's hand, leading her back across the deck. Their steps slow and unhurried. They felt no need to rush. The night stretched before them, filled with possibilities. Their lives stretched before them, filled with even more possibilities. And this was only the start of their physical journey together. A journey that had started on paper many years before was now entering a new chapter. Who knows, they both thought as they reached their cabin, how the rest of this beautiful adventure will play out. They stepped off the boat, and the world changed. The air was thick with scent, hot, spiced, unfamiliar. Somewhere close by, someone was frying something in oil. And further off, incense drifted like smoke from an invisible fire. Birds called out from the rooftops, and the light struck every surface with a kind of golden defiance, as if it refused to soften. Nothing moved the way it did in England. Nothing sounded the same. Even the colours seemed brighter. Clara clung to James's arm, half out of affection, half to steady herself. The dock was a riot of movement. Men in loose cotton shirts lifted crates and shouted instructions in a language she did not yet understand. There were goats tied to posts, and children darting between carts piled with fruit. And above it all, a sun unlike any they had ever known, huge and brash and full of command. James said nothing. He held her hand tightly and moved through it with quiet awe, his heart beating hard in his chest. They had spoken of India in letters and dreams, but there was no preparing for this. Even the smell of the earth was different, wet and ancient and teeming with life. It felt as if they had arrived not in a country, but on another planet, where the rules were older, deeper, and not yet explained. They left the city before nightfall. A carriage took them inland, past trees that bent as if listening, and birds with cries like instruments. The road climbed steadily. With every mile, the noise fell away, and then, just as the light began to leave the sky, they reached it. A valley so still and wide and green that Clara gasped aloud. A river ran through it, pale and slow, and the hills on either side seemed to fold around it like arms. Fireflies rose from the grass. The stars above were already waking. They would stay there for as long as they could. A house had been arranged, open to the air, with soft floors and white walls and wooden shutters that swung gently in the breeze. At night, they would fall asleep to the sound of the water. In the morning, they would sit side by side and watch the mist lift. Nothing had prepared them for this. It was not simply beautiful. It was beyond. It was the place they had been writing toward all along. In the days that followed, they lived quietly. There was no one else in the valley, only a gardener who arrived in the early hours to tend to the hibiscus and sweep the veranda. They took their meals outdoors, beneath a frangipani tree, and Clara kept a notebook open on the table beside her, where she recorded little things she noticed. How the light moved across the grass, how the birds paused before flying. James sketched beside her, sometimes the house, sometimes her hands. They did not speak much of the journey behind them. The train, the ship, the wedding on the deck of the boat. All of it seemed far away now, as if it had happened to different versions of themselves. Each evening they sat close together and watched the colors of the sky deepen. There was no need to say anything. The beauty was too complete. Then, on the 7th morning, a boy arrived barefoot on the path with a letter. He did not speak English, but bowed once and waited until James returned with a coin. The envelope was smudged and torn at the corner, but the handwriting was unmistakable, sharp, formal, and carefully slanted. James read it once, standing, then again sitting. Clara watched his face and knew, even before he looked up, that something had shifted. "There's a man I must see," James said. "He was a friend of my father's. He has asked for me." He folded the letter, resting his thumb on the crease for a moment longer than necessary. "It's in Delhi. 3 days by rail." Clara nodded. She did not ask whether he would go. She already knew. She rose and kissed him lightly on the cheek, then went inside to prepare a small case for him. When she returned, James had not moved. The birds still called in the trees. The sun was already climbing higher in the sky. He left the next morning, before the sun had risen. The air was still cool, and the sky above the hills was the pale blue of worn linen. Clara walked with him to the path where the boy had first appeared, the satchel slung over James's shoulder, and a scarf knotted lightly at his throat. Neither of them spoke. It was the kind of silence they had grown used to, companionable, unforced. At the bend in the path, he turned and looked back at her. She had stopped a few paces behind. The garden glowed faintly in the early light. She was barefoot, her hair unpinned. He wanted to remember her exactly like that. He gave her a half smile, grateful, uncertain, filled with love. Then he turned again and walked on. The train station was small and half covered in vines. A single platform ran alongside a rusted track, and a thin man in a cap sat half asleep beside a bell. The train arrived with no warning, and James climbed aboard and found a window seat facing forward. The bench was wooden, the metal armrest cold beneath his hand. He pressed his forehead to the glass and waited for the world to move. As the train pulled away, he reached into the side of his bag to check for the envelope he had packed. Instead, his hand brushed a folded square of paper. Clara's writing, tucked where she knew he would find it. He did not open it yet. He kept it in his hand as the train passed fields and slow cows, trees draped in red flowers, women walking in bright saris along the dirt paths. He would read it when the time was right. Back at the house, Clara remained by the garden for a long time. A small bird had landed on the stone basin near the steps, dipping its head to drink. She stood still, so as not to disturb it. Then, finally, she turned and walked slowly back inside. The rooms already felt different, lighter in some places, emptier in others. She poured a cup of tea, sat by the window, and opened her notebook. She would write to him again before the day ended. The train had been moving for nearly an hour when James opened the letter. He waited until the land around him had emptied out. Fields turned to long stretches of dust and sky, and the compartments around him had gone still. He slid his thumb along the fold and carefully unfolded the page. Clara's handwriting was familiar now, with its soft angles and pauses, in all the same places she paused when she spoke. My James, when you read this, I won't be there beside you, and I hate that already. You will be on the train, and I will be here in the garden, watching the birds and listening for your footsteps, knowing they won't come today, or tomorrow, or the next. And I know you had to go, but would never ask you to stay. But it feels as though something has been pulled from me, something important and warm and familiar. You are so quiet when you pack. I watched you fold your shirts like a man carrying out a duty, and I didn't say anything, because I knew if I spoke, I might cry. But now that you're gone, and I have the paper in front of me, I want to say everything. I want to say that these days here with you have felt like the real beginning of my life. That I've never known peace like this. Not before you, and not even on the ship, where everything felt borrowed. But here, in this strange and beautiful place, I wake and know myself by the way your hand finds mine before either of us speaks. I love you more than I knew I could love anything. Do you remember yesterday when we stood at the river and you said nothing at all, but looked out across the water as if you'd seen something? I didn't ask what it was. I didn't need to. I could feel it too. There's something about this place that makes the silence feel holy. And when I'm in it with you, I feel as though we are part of something ancient, something good. So I will stay here and wait for you, and write to you every day. Not because I want to fill the distance, but because I want to walk beside you, even now, even while you are away. I want you to hear my voice in these words. I want you to feel, as you hold this page, how much of me is yours. Come back slowly if you must, but come back. There is no world I want to know that doesn't have you in it, Always, Clara. After reading the letter, James took the pencil from the inside pocket of his coat, the same one he used to write to Clara before they were married, before he could sit beside her in silence. The paper he used was rougher than he liked, and the train jolted now and then. But he didn't wait for better conditions. He laid the notebook on his knee, steadied his hand, and began. My Clara, I don't know what I expected to find in your letter. Something sweet, I suppose. A few lines to make me smile. But instead I found you. Completely. Your words held me so tightly. I almost forgot where I was. I looked up and the train was still moving, and the trees outside were still slipping by. But I felt as though I had stepped off somewhere and found you waiting for me with your hand out. I miss you already. Not in the way I thought I might. I miss you the way I miss water when I am thirsty, or the way I used to miss my father when I was too young to understand why he wasn't there. It's a feeling in the bones, not a sadness, but a sense that something is out of place, and that it will right itself only when I am beside you again. There's a woman across from me on the train. She's older. She has a basket full of green things, leaves perhaps, or herbs. She smiled at me just now, as if she could tell I was writing to someone I love. I nodded, and she nodded back. And for a moment, I felt almost like a husband in the ordinary way, not a man on a journey, but someone who has a place to return to. And that place is you. I hope the garden is quiet today. I hope the river is moving slowly. I hope your hands are warm and that you are keeping them busy, the way you do when you are alone. Don't press too many flowers. Save some for when I return. We will walk around and choose them together. Yours in everything, James. He set the pencil down and folded the paper once, then again. He kept it in his lap, running his thumb gently along the edge. The woman with the basket smiled again, though she hadn't been watching him. Outside, the sky was beginning to cloud, and the light was changing. James leaned back, closed his eyes, and imagined the sound of the river below their house. It was the only sound he wanted to sleep to now. The stars were already out by the time Clara lit the lamp. She didn't even need it. There was moonlight enough. But the small glow gave her comfort. She sat on the veranda floor with a blanket pulled round her shoulders, the writing board balanced on her knees. Somewhere down in the grass, the river ran as it always did. She had written nothing all day, though she had thought often of James. She had watched the shadows shift on the garden path, had eaten from the same plate he had used, and had sat for a while by the hibiscus tree, listening to the wind move through its leaves. But now, in the hush of the evening, something was pressing inside her. Not fear, not longing exactly, but the need to put down what she felt before it slipped away. My James, there is something in the air tonight, a kind of stillness, but not the usual kind. It feels like the space between two things, like something has ended, and something else is about to begin. I don't mean something terrible, don't worry. It's more like the ground under my feet is softening, not disappearing, just loosening, the way soil does before it gives way to a seed. I don't know what you will find in Delhi. Perhaps an old man in a quiet room, and the kind of conversation that leaves nothing changed. But perhaps not. I think you might be seeing something, feeling something that doesn't yet have a name. And I think that whatever it is, I will feel it too, even from here. I sat by the river today and watched a heron walk through the reeds. It moved so slowly, I thought it might be asleep on its feet. But then it took flight so suddenly I laughed aloud. That's how I feel tonight, half asleep, and yet something in me is already lifting. Come back when you're ready. But come back different, if that's what this asks of you. I'll be here. Always, Clara. She folded the letter and pressed it between the pages of her notebook. She wasn't sure if she would even send it. She would decide in the morning. She sat back against the wall and looked up at the stars. The sky was so wide, it made her breath catch. She could not name what she felt, but it was coming. Something beautiful. Delhi was thick with heat. The buildings leaned over narrow streets, and carts rattled across stones worn smooth by years of passing. James arrived in the late afternoon and made his way to the house without speaking. The address had been written carefully, and the rickshaw driver had known it without hesitation. The house was low and square, painted a kind of pale yellow that had long since faded. A boy met James at the gate and led him through a small garden where the soil was dry and crumbling. There were no flowers, only a single neem tree leaning over a bench. The boy knocked gently at a wooden door, then slipped away before it opened. The man who answered looked much older than James had expected. His hair was white, but not entirely. There were threads of black near the ears. His shirt was clean and too large, his eyes dark and steady. He smiled as though the smile cost him something, but he gave it freely. "James," he said, "you've come." James nodded. "You wrote?" The man gestured him inside. They sat together in a room with thick curtains and little light. A fan stirred slowly above them, its rhythm like breath. Tea was brought. For a while, neither of them said anything. Then the man leaned forward and rested both hands on his knees. "Your father died 6 weeks ago," he said. "I'm sorry you weren't told sooner. He didn't want anything sent. He thought you might already be traveling." He was right. James looked down into the cup he hadn't yet touched. He felt no surprise, only a spreading quiet. "I was with him at the end," the man said. "He wasn't afraid. He spoke about you often, about Clara too. Though he'd never met her, he said, James is steady. He waits for things to speak before answering. I liked that." James smiled faintly. "He said I might be coming east. He thought you would. And he asked me, if you did, to write. Just one note. No details. He said, he'll come if he's ready, and if he's not, he won't." James nodded slowly. I was ready. The man stood and crossed the room to a small cabinet. He opened it carefully and returned with a bundle of pages, bound loosely with a faded green ribbon. This is what he left. I haven't read it. He made me promise. James reached for it and held it in both hands. The paper was worn soft at the edges. It felt oddly warm. There's something else, the man said, sitting back down. Your wife wrote to me. Just a few lines. It arrived only a day before you did. James looked up sharply. She must have known, the man continued. Not exactly, maybe, but enough. She wrote, James is the kind of man who listens without interrupting. I believe you'll know what to give him. And she was right. I do. James sat very still. The bundle of pages rested in his lap. The man gave him a long, tired smile. There's nothing urgent in this house anymore. You can read it here or take it with you. He didn't say what you should do next. He only said, let him go slowly. The light through the curtain had grown paler. Outside, someone was sweeping the street in long, even strokes. The world carried on. James stood and shook the man's hand. They didn't speak again. There was no need to. The door closed softly behind him, and the noise of the street returned. As he stepped back into the heat, the pages tucked against his chest. The train pulled out of Delhi just after dusk. James sat by the window, the bundle of pages resting on his lap, untouched. The compartment was nearly empty. A boy across the aisle slept with his head against his mother's shoulder. The city fell away behind them, in low lights and distant horns, and the rhythm of the wheels settled into something close to thought. He hadn't opened the pages yet. He had only held them, felt their weight, as if the words inside already lived in him somehow, waiting to be remembered rather than read. The man's house had stayed with him, not for its details, but for the stillness. He thought of his father then, and didn't turn away from the thought. Outside, the land was darkening. The hills had returned, rising softly against the sky, and somewhere beyond them, the river curved quietly through the valley, waiting. Clara was waiting too. He could almost see her now. His love. He needed her in this moment, but he knew he would see her soon. He looked down at the bundle of letters once more, and then, slowly, he began to untie the ribbon. The ribbon came loose easily, as though it had been waiting. James unfolded the first page with the care of someone handling something that could not be replaced. The handwriting was his father's, that familiar slope he had known all his life, firm at the start of each line, and softening towards the end, as though the hand tired of its own formality. He read without hurrying. Outside, India slipped past in the dark, a fire here, a lantern there, the faint outline of a tree against a sky full of stars. The train kept its rhythm, steady and unhurried, as if it too understood that this was not a moment to be rushed. His father had not written instructions. He had not written regrets. He had written instead about small things. A morning from James's childhood, when he had brought a wounded sparrow into the kitchen and sat beside it on the floor for 2 hours, speaking to it quietly until it stood and flew. The way James would go very still before answering a difficult question, as if he needed to hear the answer forming inside him before he could trust it. A grove of trees near their estate, where his father had sometimes walked alone, not because he was unhappy, but because he found it good to be small beneath something old. Near the end of the final page, almost as though it were an afterthought, his father had written, I heard about the girl from your letters. Not what you said, but how you said it. There is a kind of steadiness a man gets when he has found his right place in the world. I recognized it because I felt it once myself. I hope you find your way to her. I believe you will. James sat for a long time after he finished reading. The pages rested in his lap, and the stars moved slowly above the hills. He was not sad exactly. He was full, in the way that a room is full when the last piece of furniture has been placed and the space finally becomes what it was always meant to be. He folded the pages carefully and tucked them into the inside pocket of his coat, close. Then he closed his eyes and slept. He arrived back at the valley in the late afternoon of the following day. The light was already golden, falling long and warm across the grass, and the fireflies were beginning their early rising from the riverbank. He walked the path from the small station alone, his bag over one shoulder, and his father's pages still resting against his chest. He heard her before he saw her. She was in the garden, speaking quietly to the gardener in her still halting Hindi, and the gardener was nodding patiently, as he always did. And then she laughed, that clear, unguarded laugh he had first heard through years of letters, before he could have said what it sounded like. And then she turned and saw him on the path. She did not run. She simply walked toward him through the evening light, barefoot, as she always was now in this garden. And she stopped when she reached him and looked up at his face with those steady eyes that had never once asked him to be anything other than himself. He said nothing. He opened his coat and showed her the pages. She looked at them, and then at him. She understood. She took his free hand in both of hers, and they stood together for a moment in the garden, while the light went on doing what light does in that valley at that hour, which was to make everything seem as though it had been chosen. That evening, they sat side by side on the veranda, as they had before, their chairs pulled close enough that their shoulders touched. The river moved below them, pale and slow in the dusk, and the hills on either side folded around it as they always had, unchanged by anything that had happened or not happened beyond their reach. Clara poured tea. James placed his father's pages on the low table beside him, where he could see them. She did not ask him to tell her everything. She would not need to. There would be a morning soon enough when he would begin to speak about it, slowly, in the way he did, and she would listen. And then she would say something that he hadn't quite known he needed to hear, and it would be enough. Later, when the stars had fully taken the sky, and the lamp inside the house threw its soft square of light across the floor, Clara brought out her notebook and set it on her knees, an old habit. She opened it to a fresh page and held the pen for a moment, and then she closed it again. She looked at James, who was already half asleep in his chair, his chin lowered slightly, his breathing slow. She found that she had nothing to write, not because there was nothing to say, but because it was already all here in the warm dark, in the sound of the river, in the small weight of his shoulder against hers. She had spent a long time now reaching across the distance toward him, putting herself down on paper, sending pieces of herself into the unknown, and waiting for them to find their way home. But there was no distance anymore. She set the notebook gently aside. Above the valley, the stars were very bright and very still. The fireflies rose and fell in the grass below, their lights blinking softly in the dark, like small repeated questions that did not need answering. The river ran on in its ancient way, cool and unhurried and indifferent to the hour, the way rivers have always run and will always run in the quiet places of the world. James slept. Clara pulled her shawl a little tighter and looked out at all of it. The stars, the fireflies, the hills, the sky, and felt, for the first time she could remember, entirely still, not empty, not waiting, still, as if the journey had not ended with arrival, but with this. The two of them breathing softly in the dark, in a valley they had never imagined, at the end of a long road, made entirely of words. She let her own eyes close